The next talk is about a web editor for JSON Bibframe data in libraries. And that's a talk by Nicolas Prongué, who is information specialist at RERO Plus, an IT and competence center for libraries in Switzerland. He collaborates in the development of the library system RERO ILS, bringing functional specifications and a librarian point of view to the project. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Liz, and welcome to this short talk about a web editor for JSON Bibframe data. I will just start with a short context why we do this, then present the editor in a user point of view, especially usability aspects, and end with a small explanation of why is this relevant for semantic web conference. But let's start with a short before after. So this was the situation 6 months before, and this is the situation now. So it's a basic MARC versus new comparison. We are the RERO Plus Foundation. Maybe you know the RERO library networks in Switzerland. We became RERO Plus now. We are a non-for-profit foundation with open source philosophy and host and develop IT solutions in Switzerland, especially two of them, Sonar and RERO ILS. Both of them are using this web editor. These solutions are based on Invenio 3, developed in Geneva by CERN. And we develop RERO ILS and this JSON editor in collaboration with University of Louvain in Belgium. So about the usability, I will present a 6 challenge actually that we had during the development and we still have now. First, the data structure and granularity. So you see this is one field in RERO ILS in the JSON structure, and you see it has a lot of subfield and a very big granularity that is offered by the JSON syntax. So here I highlighted the various levels. If we count them, we have 7 depth level, which is in comparison to MARC much more complex to present in an editor. So this is the equivalent of the same field in MARC, the famous provision activity field of Bibframe, and we see in MARC it is spread in at least 4 different MARC fields. So the data structure is different and more granular, and this is a challenge for a web editor that has to be user-friendly. Concretely, JSON has a specific structure consisting of names and value. Here you have a name and a simple value. You can also have sometimes a name and a repetitive value. This is the case of almost every field in MARC 21. They are almost all repetitive, which does not make it easier. We can also have a name with an array of objects. For example, here identifiers can contain more than one identifier, and each identifier can contain a type, a value, a status, a qualification. Some of the fields are required, some of them are not, and we need all the interface buttons to enable to add, remove, and interact with the form in an easy way. So here is the identified by field. And the last example, this is the most complex one that I will present. It's a name plus array of arrays of objects, and this object contains name and simple value. It seems complex, but it's only the field statement of responsibility. You can have various statements. Here we have two statements, and each of them have transliterations. So first the Latin version and the Cyrillic version. So the editor had to cope with this. Second challenge was the compactness. If you look at the ascensor on the right, you see that you cannot have an overview of all the fields in the same web page. This is why we had to add this jump to section. This is a big difference in comparison to a MARC editor where you type directly in the code. Actually, you type the dollars and so on. Our users were used to have this overview. To create it, to make it shorter, we had to hide some optional fields. Here you see for the title field, we decided to hide the subfield, other title information, and it could be added manually as an option. And we also have fields that are displayed by default because they are important. Next challenge, the visual layout. We introduced a fake repetition of labels. So here, this is the normal editor, and this is the version if we had not this label repetitions. So you see for some nest, we had to put a fictive label so that the end user understand what he or she is going to duplicate or to delete. But in the data, we have no fields called responsibility or values. We just have an array, basically. Second and third things we did, lines and indentation for the end user to understand better the data structure. All this trying to keep a clean design because it can become very difficult to see where is what if we add too much in the interface. And the fourth point is responsiveness, since we do a web editor. So here you see the same field in different size screens. On the left, we have the mobile size, and on the right, the bigger window size, where we tried to align some input fields here, because it makes it also easier for the end user to understand the data structure if things are aligned. Point D, we use RDA labels and lists. So thanks to this, the editor can be multilingual. You have this here, the example of content types. Of course, there is sometimes labels that are not that user-friendly in RDA, but at least we have no more MARC codes. For example, in MARC, we had to type the MARC codes and to know it to be able to use the editor. One big advantage of this editor is that it can give a direct validation and feedback to the user when the person is typing. Here, three basic validation. Here on a date, here on an ISBN, and there on the left, on the right, on a language list. Yeah, before we had to, the user was always able to save the form, and we had to launch every week some verification scripts to identify the dates errors and ISBN errors, and it was quite painful. Now the user is not allowed to save the record if there are some blocking errors. Another validation or interaction is the autocomplete to link a document to other resources. Here with the very typical field contribution, we have links to a corporate body. Moment. And the last point is the textual help elements. We have, on the one hand, placeholders, where we decided to put example of data, as you have it here, or recommended RDA terms. And we also have another option, the tooltips, where we put a definition of the fields and, if necessary, some input rules. For example, use one or more RDR terms. And we also put the MARC correspondence because it still helps for some of our users. So just those 6 points are very important for us because we develop and have this editor for public libraries, sometimes also very small school libraries, and it has to be easy to use. What's behind the editor? We have a data model defined in JSON schema. It's like it's a set of rules defining the validations and so on of the various fields. We have 54 first-level bibliographic properties. What is great is that this editor is generic. It works for all kinds of JSON data. For example, in our library system, we also edit library patrons or acquisitions with the same editor. It's based on Angular 12, and you can see here, you can reuse it or test it. We have the links on GitHub. Concretely, here you see how the JSON schema looks like. It uses a JSON syntax. The field names, the field keys uses the Bibframe structure. For example, here we have field credits, comes directly from Bibframe ontology. And lastly, we use RDA labels to be displayed in the interface because we don't want to disturb our user with where the Bibframe names. So here credits has as title note on statement of responsibility. We also added some JSON schema custom fields to define form options. This is where we place the placeholder and also some navigation rules, hiding rules, or the size of the field. I think as a librarian, this is an advantage of JSON schema to generate an editor because I can read it. It's human readable, not only machine readable. So this is one of the positive points. The other is the better UX in comparison to MARC, at least for the learning curve. We had already positive feedbacks from our librarian that it was easier to introduce this editor to the new person arriving in the library. We have a better data quality because we have direct validation. And again, this editor is generic for all kinds of JSON data. The negative points are some UX disadvantage for power users or for user used to MARC. It's a difficult change. Other disadvantages are linked to the abandon of MARC, which is still a difficulty because we have to keep import and export functionalities. And also because Bibframe is a changing standard. I'm almost finished. Why is this important for semantic data? Firstly, because we can enter high structured bibliographic data, which is not the case with MARC. We store values directly in linked data format. So if you open the JSON data, you can see some Bibframe and RDA values. We should still add the context, but we are just one step away of JSON-LD. This is a work to be done, maybe next year. And we have a dynamic integration of IDRef and GND data in the editor, as you could see it in the autocomplete functionalities. So, thank you. If you have any question.